is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Ukraine holds its first war crimes trial since the invasion, as a Russian soldier stands accused of shooting an unarmed civilian.
Our other headlines: G7 ministers meet in Germany. On their agenda, more aid for Ukraine and how to help with the export of Ukraine's grain harvest.
Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionists say they'll stall the regional assembly until a post-Brexit trade deal is ripped up.
Tweeting down Twitter, Elon Musk says his takeover of the social media platform is on hold, sending the shares plunging.
And who says grapes need sun-kissed southern slopes? Why Nordic wines from northern climes are the toast of the town. The first war crimes trial since Russia invaded Ukraine has opened in Kyiv.
A 21-year-old Russian soldier is accused of shooting an unarmed civilian in the head and could face life in prison if found guilty. The Ukrainian prosecutor says he was ordered by another Russian soldier to shoot the man to stop him giving away their position after their convoy was hit.
Meanwhile, footage released by Ukraine appears to show an entire Russian battalion wiped out in a river crossing. Well, let's talk to Associated Press reporter Kieran McQuillan, who's in Lviv. Kieran, tell us more about this war crimes trial.
Yes, Robin, this is a procedural hearing that took place at midday today here in Kiev. It's the procedural trial of Vadim Shishimin. Now, he is a member of a tank unit that was operating around the Sumy area of eastern Ukraine on the 28th of February, when he's accused of shooting a unarmed 62-year-old Ukrainian man who was on a bicycle, and he died on the spot. He appeared in that courtroom in Kiev behind a glass screen, surrounded by a large group of journalists. He was wearing a grey tracksuit, head shaved, head bowed most of the time. He was asked if he understood what was going on, if he was asked his name, etc., and if he understood his rights, and he bowed his head and very quietly answered yes. Now, his lawyer says that his client has admitted that he did indeed fire the gun that killed that 62-year-old Ukrainian. He doesn't know yet whether he will plead guilty or not. He says he needs more time. And he said he was following orders. Now, there are some questions around this trial, especially as it's been held so quickly after the invasion of this country, less than 80 days. I mean, usually war crimes tribunals take years to come to the conclusions. And those questions, some of them are like, can this be a fair trial when a country is at war? Will he get fair representation and a fair defence? And can his rights as a prisoner be respected? And is there enough time to collect what's called a chain of evidence? This is a very important component of these war crimes tribunals and investigations. Now, the trial proper gets underway in Kiev next Wednesday, May the 18th.
And we've been seeing footage of Russia's failed attempt to cross a river in the Donbass region.
That's right. Some very striking drone and satellite images have appeared of a couple of pontoon bridges which were blown across the Seversky Donetsk River. Now, this is a key river that connects, it runs east-west, and it is vital that the Russians cross this to continue their campaign to encircle some of Ukraine's elite troops who are fighting along that Donbass front line that has opened up in the war down in that region. Now, UK MOD sources say that the Russians could have lost up to a battalion. A battalion is 1,000 men, maybe not men, but indeed counts of about 50 to 70 vehicles have been seen in these images. Some of them have been disabled. Some of them, these are Russian tanks and armoured personnel carriers. Some of them have been burnt out. But it does speak to the fact that the Russians are desperate to get across this river, which is a physical barrier, to continue their campaign to try and encircle those Ukrainian forces.
And there have been protests in Kyiv demanding the government rescue the remaining soldiers in the Azovstal steelworks. What's the latest you're hearing from Mariupol?
Well, we did feel that the Azov Brigade, who are the main component of that defence force in that steelworks, were under some pressure. There's about 2,000 of them. Some of them are very ill and sick, but some startling images did emerge of some of these Azov fighters when running gun battles. Now, we don't know, we can't verify any of these pictures. They were released to us yesterday, but we do know that the Deputy Prime Minister of this country is engaged in negotiations with the Russians to release 38 of these very ill Azov fighters and some of the other forces from Ukraine that are there in exchange for what she calls high valuable Russian prisoners.
Kieran, thanks very much. Kieran McQuillan from the Associated Press there in Lviv.
Russia's foreign minister says the EU is becoming aggressive and militant with ambitions far beyond the European continent.
Sergei Lavrov was speaking at a meeting of former Soviet states. Meanwhile, Russia has told its citizens not to travel to Britain, blaming what it says is the UK's unfriendly and politically motivated stance on visas.
Well, our correspondent Stuart Smith is in Moscow and a reminder that reporters in Russia are working under laws that can restrict what they can say. Stuart, tell us more about Sergei Lavrov's criticism of the EU.
Well, it comes the same week that Ukraine finished the second questionnaire and final questionnaire required for the country to become a candidate member of the European Union. And Sergei Lavrov's comments come ahead of came after comments by the deputy representative of Russia to the United Nations, who overnight spoke about how he believed the assessment of Ukraine joining the European Union was now becoming more like Russia's position on Ukraine joining the European Union, joining NATO, because he says the two are becoming very similar. He cited two pieces of evidence there. The one statement, a tweet by Josep Borrell, the EU's top diplomat, which when he wrote earlier in May that the war must be won on the battlefield. And the second thing he says is that the European Union has become the lead supplier of weapons to Ukraine. Today, in Tajikistan, the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said this.
The European Union has turned from a constructive economic platform, as it was created, into an aggressive militant player who is already declaring its ambitions far beyond the European continent.
He went on to say that the European Union is on the same track as NATO, and he believes that the bloc will end up acting as one of the arms of NATO.
And Russia advising its citizens not to travel to the UK.
Yeah, that's right. The foreign ministry here saying that many citizens of Russia have reported extreme month-long delays when trying to apply for visas, whether for tourist purposes, work, or to visit family, and that it's not, the latest statement is in order for them not to have problems with the UK authorities in order to avoid financial losses. Now, the British Embassy has reported to the Russian Foreign Ministry, allegedly, that this is because they are prioritising refugee visas from Ukraine. And so the Russian Foreign Ministry says in which case this is a politicised infringement of the rights of Russian citizens, and until the situation is normalised, Russia says that it will be enacting a similar policy against British applicants to come and visit the Russian Federation or work here as well. This comes the same day as a new round of sanctions was imposed by the UK on Russia, this time personal sanctions against very close associates of Russian President Vladimir Putin, his former wife, his current alleged girlfriend, and even the grandmother of his current alleged girlfriend, as well as many relatives. The UK justifies that by saying that many of them are holding the president's wealth on his behalf and have also been given top positions in important state companies, and so are valid targets for personal sanctions. So far, state media here is reporting that 1.6 thousand Russian citizens, journalists, politicians, officials and enterprises have been sanctioned.
Stuart, thanks for that. Stuart Smith, our correspondent in Moscow.
Foreign ministers from G7 countries are meeting in Germany. On the agenda, Ukraine, energy and food security, China and climate change. Also present are the foreign ministers of Ukraine and Moldova. Well, our correspondent Trent Murray is in Berlin. Trent, tell us more about this gathering of G7 foreign ministers.
Yeah, well, it's been a big day of diplomatic discussions. They're all meeting in Weisenhauser, which is a resort town up on the Baltic Sea, but they won't be getting much time on the seaside, I suspect, Robin, because there is plenty for them to discuss. Obviously, Ukraine really top of the agenda. Of course, Liz Truss, the UK Foreign Secretary, going into that meeting, calling for more weapons to go to Ukraine to help them defend themselves. Also a ratcheting up of sanctions on Russian entities, as Stuart was discussing. But it was really the European Union that really made many of the headlines because they came armed with their checkbook pledging 500 million euros to Ukraine, money they say they want to see spent on, again, military aid to help rearm the Ukrainian armed forces. We also had the Ukrainian foreign minister in attendance. He put forward quite an interesting idea. I don't know how much traction it will get, but what he suggested was that G7 countries should pass legislation that would allow them to seize Russian sovereign assets and then hand them over to Ukraine so Ukraine can then effectively sell them and use the money to help rebuild the country. It's a controversial idea, but it's one that he said he put forward to G7 foreign ministers, and he hopes that maybe they might listen.
And Trent, Ukraine's agriculture minister wants help to end a blockade on its Black Sea ports. What's been the response to that?
Well, this has been another really active topic discussed today, not just at this meeting in Weisenhauser that I mentioned, but at a separate meeting taking place in Stuttgart, again here in Germany, where G7 agriculture ministers are meeting. And this was discussed, this very issue, the fact that it's estimated around 25 million tonnes of grain are currently stuck in Ukrainian ports. And the UN and the EU has said a lot of that grain was destined for the developing world, and so they want to try and see a situation where they can get that grain out, I should say, and allow it to be exported, because they say if that doesn't happen, there could be potential famine or food shortages down the line, not just in Ukraine, but further abroad. It was an issue that Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, was also keen to discuss with her counterparts. Let's just have a listen to what she had to say before closing the doors to reporters.
The hybrid war is not only by tanks and air missiles, not only with fake news and propaganda, but also it's a food war, which we can see around the world already. The corn being kept in Ukraine because Russia is not allowing millions of tons of corn being exported in the world is a big danger. So therefore it's really good that we are focusing now at this session at the global food crisis.
And what do we know about this 75-minute call between German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Russia's President Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, Robert, I mean, this sort of comes somewhat out of the blue, to be honest with you. We didn't know this call was going to take place, but it was a long one, in the words of the Chancellery. Olaf Scholz speaking to President Putin directly for the first time, really in many, many weeks and months. What we know they discussed was, from the Russian perspective, the Kremlin said that they conveyed to the German side that they don't think Ukraine is willing to negotiate on some of their key concerns. But Olaf Scholz then came out with his own statement, and he actually issued it in English, which is quite unusual. He doesn't normally do that, and I think it speaks to the fact he wanted the audience to this discussion to be outside of Germany. He said he put 3 points to Putin today on the call. Number one, there must be a ceasefire in Ukraine as quickly as possible. Number two, the claims that Nazis are in power there are false. And number three, I reminded him of his responsibility to the global food situation. So obviously it was probably a tense call at times, given some of the topics that were discussed. And as you mentioned, it lasted some 75 minutes, so presumably they covered a lot of ground.
Trent, thanks very much. Our correspondent Trent Murray in Berlin.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, what's going on with the sale of Twitter to Elon Musk? He says it's on pause. We're in New York next.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. A quick reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Well, Elon Musk has been causing a bit of a stir with tweets about Twitter, saying his plan to take over the social media platform is on hold while he seeks more information about fake accounts. Let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett, in New York. What's going on? Is he playing with us?
Yeah. Of course he is. Of course he is. And I think if you asked him, Jamie and Robin, he'd say, well, I just could do it, so I will. That's kind of his attitude in life. And we love him for it, don't we? I mean, Charlotte, our producer, she wouldn't have a show if it wasn't for Elon Musk. We'd have to end the show 20 minutes early. So I think what happened, I was in bed this morning, I put my leg out of the duvet, and my little thing went bing, and I looked at it, and it said, Elon Musk is saying that basically, you know, the sale of Twitter is on hold. So he basically pumped the brakes on the whole Twitter deal very early this morning, about 7 a.m. our time. And then there was another tweet that came about 90 minutes later. And let me explain the two tweets to you. So the first one said it's on hold. And the reason is Twitter says that the amount of spam and fake news on its site for what they call MDAUs, which is the monetizable daily active users, is less than 5%. And Musk doesn't believe them. And he wants an inquiry into that, which is why it's on hold. So then about 90 minutes later, I was downstairs having a slice of toast and a curl of butter, and it went bing again. And this time it's Elon Musk saying, I am still committed to buying Twitter. So we go, oh, goodness me, that's wonderful. And what's odd about this is that this whole issue of how much spam and how much fake news is on Twitter and within the realm of those that are monetizable is nothing new. I mean, this has been around forever. This is simply not news. And Reuters, the news agency, did a report on this 11 days ago. So why he came up with this now, I don't know, which is why I say he probably is toying with us a little bit. Now, it comes in the same week as there have been sackings among the management team at Twitter in San Francisco in preparation for Musk's arrival. It comes as he's made comments about Donald Trump this week. He said it was unfair that the former president was bounced off Twitter. He said a less divisive candidate for the Republicans in 2024 would be good. And he said that he didn't necessarily support Donald Trump politically. But what I think is really going on, if you strip it all away, is that he's trying to renegotiate the price because he's paying $54.20 per share. And I think, quite simply, in this environment, he thinks he could pay less. And I know that he's been looking at various ways of doing this with various banks and institutions and supporters over the course of the last week or so. So I think really he wants to pay less for this media asset than he's presently agreed to. That's what this is about.
So tell us how the investors reacted.
They were as shocked as I was. I mean, they weren't in bed like I was, and they sold off immediately in the pre-market. Literally, Twitter was down by 25% instantaneously. And it has since stabilized. It's now down only 9%, which is kind of stability for you. The thing is, Jamie Robin, this is all about the big fear, because ever since he began on his Twitter account suggesting that he would buy Twitter, the real worry has been, is he serious? Is he basically messing us around? Is he toying with us, as you said at the top? And people worry that actually he is. And the reason this matters so much is because I think Wall Street, which has an interest in Twitter at the moment, thinks what's going to happen is that he'll take it private for about 3 years and then bring it back to the public market. So there's really an awful lot at stake here. And it's odd to point out, when Twitter went down by 25%, Tesla shares went up quite a lot in the pre-market. And then when Twitter stabilized, it all happened the other way around for Tesla. And the reason for that is, I think investors are very concerned about actually how much money he is going to take out of Tesla. Despite what he says, actually how much is he really going to take out of Tesla from his own portfolio in order to fund this Twitter purchase? And then after that, how much time is he actually going to spend running Twitter? And will that be to the detriment of SpaceX and Tesla? Tesla in particular, you see, has become a bellwether company. For such a new company, it's now one of those stocks that everybody looks at to try and work out what's really going on. And Tesla shares at the moment are up about 7%. So once again, it's a Friday. Nothing's likely to happen over the weekend unless he tweets further. And we'll see where we are next week.
We'll see you on Monday. John, for that, thanks very much. Our correspondent, John Terrace in New York.
A dramatic meltdown in cryptocurrency appears to have slowed. Bitcoin has rebounded above $30,000, but is still set for a record losing streak. Billions of dollars have been wiped off the market after the crash of Terra USD, a so-called stablecoin. Well, let's talk now to Jason Dean, who's a Bitcoin analyst from Quantum Economics. Welcome to the program, Jason. So what's behind this big fall of cryptocurrencies? What's the reason?
Well, hi guys, nice to be back again. You've got to remember we are in very uncertain times generally, just macroeconomically. The picture right now is pretty dire. We've got monetary inflation all over the place. We've got banks trying to control that. We've got supply line issues. So there is uncertainty all over the place right now. But as you say, we've had some big moves in crypto recently, Bitcoin and certain other coins, due to contagion, really, of an event which occurred earlier this week, which I'm sure you're going to ask me about, which, of course, is UST and Terra. Basically, we saw a collapse there of something called a stable coin. And a stable coin is a coin which is designed to always equal $1. So 1 Terra, whatever unit you're using, always equals $1. And the idea is that you can move through cryptocurrencies and rotate between these currencies. However, these are usually backed directly by assets. In Terra's case, they decided something, experimental, something different, an algorithmic backing. It's a complicated thing, which I don't propose to go into here. It didn't work. It collapsed, and suddenly Terra was no longer equal to $1, which is a problem if you're a stable coin. So, of course, there was a wipeout, there was a meltdown, there's a collapse, and then there was a contagion leading to other parts of the cryptocurrency market. So all in all, broadly, it's a mess, and particularly in crypto, there's been a mess this week as well.
Well, let's talk a little more about these stable coins then. The clue in the name, obviously, they're supposed to be stable. So why is it such a big deal that they have lost this value?
Well, it is a big deal because if you think about it, there are several stable coins, by the way, and as I say, they're usually backed 1-to-1 as you would expect. But if you're, buying $1, if you're expecting to hold $1, and all of a sudden that dollar drops to, 70 cents, 60 cents, right down to just a few cents, that is obviously a major problem, particularly if you've got large sums of money into it. And it shouldn't happen. The whole point of a stable coin is it always stays at $1. So it caught people out. It's the first time this has happened. And as I say, it was because of this kind of experimental approach, which, got to give them credit for trying, but it didn't work.
So how much would you say of this is a real loss of value, and how much is perhaps that the value in some cases has been artificially inflated?
Well, that's a fair question. In both cases, I would say it's significant. We don't really know for sure, but you've got to remember valuations come from what the market says the valuation is. It's as simple as that. All assets, not just cryptocurrencies, equities, anything are all based on what market traders, or buyers and sellers think it's worth. So those valuations, of course, you could say they're overinflated sometimes if the market's overheated, and of course they're undervalued sometimes if the market cools off. So at the end of the day, it's fair value, and you can only decide really based on that mechanism.
Jason, good to talk to you. That's Jason Dean from Quantum Economics. Thank you.
French inflation has hit 4.8% last month, its highest annual rate since the year 1985. The analysts expect the rate to top 5% in the coming months.
The rise has been driven by surging energy prices, despite the French government's energy price cap announced in January.
Well, our correspondent Ross Cullen is watching events for us in Paris. Ross, is this much of a surprise?
Now, this is confirming more or less the estimates that ANSSI, the French National Statistics Institute, did anticipate 4.8%. We haven't seen such a level of inflation that high in nearly 40 years. So it really underlines the overall situation with the price of goods increasing, the price of energy increasing, and the overall inflationary atmosphere that we do have in many European countries and also in other Western states like the United Kingdom and the United States.
How big a blow is this for newly elected President Macron?
Not that much of a blow, not that much of a setback, because this didn't come out of the blue. This wasn't a surprise. The cost of living crisis was the #1 issue, though, during the presidential campaign, something that Marine Le Pen, Emmanuel Macron's rival in the runoff last month, really did try to apply pressure on him, saying that she was best placed to deal with the cost of living crisis. That message didn't get through, though, to voters re-electing Emmanuel Macron. He knows how much of a serious situation the country is in. French voters this week in a survey, the majority of the French public do believe that the #1 focus for Emmanuel Macron at the moment and his new government, Jamie, we are expecting a reshuffle in the coming days, that #1 focus must be on dealing with the problems related to purchasing power, trying to reduce this pressure on the public and trying to deal with the high levels of inflation that we do see at the moment. We know that Emmanuel Macron wants to appoint a prime minister with a particular environmental focus. He also says he does want to appoint a prime minister who also has a social focus. So it will be interesting to see the key appointments of Interior Ministry, the Finance Ministry and that Prime Minister in the reshuffle in a couple of days' time.
Ross, it's worth saying French inflation is still lower than the EU average. Would it have been higher, perhaps, without President Macron's energy price cap?
Yeah, about 7% for EU inflation as a whole overall, and French inflation, as we've noted, just below 5% for April 2022, so it is lower. The energy price cap is certainly having an effect overall, that trying to cap that tariff to support French consumers paying lower prices for their energy bills. But Emmanuel Macron did say during the presidential campaign that it is a temporary measure. It's not something that's going to be able to be put in place permanently. So the challenge for the incoming French government is how to structure French energy policy, not just in the long term, as we're talking about trying to change France's energy mix and the focus on nuclear related to also to oil and gas and the overall geopolitical environment with the war in Ukraine. Not just a long-term policy, it's also going to be worth noting how they structure their short-term energy policy, not just for the coming years, but specifically for the coming weeks and months as they try to move on from this energy price cap that's been put in place.
Ross, good to see you. Thanks for that. Our correspondent Ross Cullen in Paris.
The EU remains divided over banning Russian oil. Hungary's Prime Minister says banning Russian energy would have a devastating impact on its economy, and its government has already been forced to intervene to stop petrol prices rising.
Our correspondent Giles Gibson reports now on one job that's particularly exposed to higher fuel costs.
Across Europe, drivers are nervously watching their petrol gauges drop as fuel prices go up. In Hungary, the government has introduced a price cap on fuel, trying to protect consumers from increases driven by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But with that limit set to expire in July, drivers are bracing themselves for a sudden jump at the pump. In the week that city authorities raised taxi fares in Budapest, we met up with two cab drivers. Andrea has an electric taxi and Tibor a diesel car.
I think that, yes, taxi fares have gone up, but not as much as our expenses have gone up. I think they should have lowered our expenses instead, at the same rate that they raised taxi prices.
Even though she doesn't have to worry about the price of petrol, Andrea says the cost of charging her electric taxi has gone up significantly.
In 2018, they were giving out so much support for driving electric cars that in many places you could charge your car for free. Then during COVID in 2020, they introduced fees for charging. So now for about 95% of the chargers, you have to pay.
Hungary's government is trying to keep prices for fuel and other staple goods manageable as the EU pushes for an embargo on importing Russian oil into the bloc. Viktor Orban says a complete embargo would be like an atomic bomb for Hungary's economy. The government wants countries like this one that are supplied exclusively by pipelines to be exempt.
Problémát és semmilyen javaslatot nem tesz a megoldására.
Orban clinched a fourth successive term in office at last month's elections, splurging more than $5 billion on tax cuts and other measures during the campaign.
Mainly because of the pre-election spending spree, which was happened in February this year. The budget situation is quite shaky, to be honest. So the government probably is facing a situation whereas they need to carry out some consolidation measures later this year.
With Hungary locked in a dispute with Brussels over the rule of law, the European Commission is also holding back billions of euros from its COVID recovery fund. Hungary's government is refusing to back down in that dispute and on Russian oil. But with high inflation showing no signs of slowing, it can't afford to protect its citizens from rising prices forever. Giles Gibson for CGTN, Budapest.
The boss of the oil giant BP says UK Finance Minister Rishi Sunak will endanger the UK's energy security if he introduces a windfall tax. Bernard Looney says taxing excess profits would make the UK a less stable environment for investing and stall plans to wean the country off foreign oil and gas. Opposition parties have called for the tax to help tackle the cost of living crisis.
The UK government says proposed cuts of up to 91,000 civil service jobs do not imply a return to austerity. Layoffs are reportedly being considered to help free up billions for tax cuts. In a letter to civil servants, the government said it aims to return to 2016 staffing levels within 3 years.
Samsung Electronics is reportedly warning clients to expect higher prices for its semiconductor chips this year as the industry tries to cover rising material and transport costs. Samsung's prices are expected to rise between 15% and 20%.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Stalemate in Northern Ireland amid anger at post-Brexit trade arrangements with the EU.
It is now important that all of us in Europe act very swiftly.
Fines for the non-vaccinated will most likely be between $1,000 and $4,000.
The new Omicron variant circulating in southern Africa.
The financial markets have also reacted badly to the news.
Growing dissatisfaction with the way the Dutch government is handling the pandemic.
Cancelling the city's main public Christmas markets for the second year in a row.
Protests and riots by those opposed to restrictions and vaccinations.
there is no room for complacency in this ongoing battle against COVID.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Ukraine holds its first war crimes trial since the invasion, as a Russian soldier stands accused of shooting an unarmed civilian.
Our other headlines: G7 ministers meet in Germany. On their agenda, more aid to Ukraine and how to help with the export of Ukraine's grain harvest.
And tweeting down Twitter, Elon Musk says his takeover of the social media platform is on hold, sending shares plunging.
Sweden says it would be vulnerable to attack if it was the only Nordic or Baltic nation to remain outside NATO. An all-party review into joining the military alliance found that membership would have a stabilising effect and benefit countries around the Baltic Sea.
It comes a day after neighbouring Finland announced its intention to join without delay. Well, CGTN's correspondent Michael Voss is in Helsinki. Michael, Sweden confident that joining NATO would have a stabilising effect?
That's right, but we're still waiting to hear officially whether Sweden is going to join. You have to remember that while Finland has been neutral for decades, for Sweden it's been about 200 years, and public opinion is more divided on this. Now, earlier today there was a joint press conference involving 6 of the 8 political parties there who do approve of joining NATO. As you say, they're looking to Finland. Now that the Finns have decided, it's very likely the Swedes will as well. And their defence minister has said that they are ready for anything that Russia may throw at them.
If Sweden chooses to seek NATO membership, there is a risk of a reaction from Russia. Let me state that in such a case we are prepared to deal with any counter-response. Russian pressure under a so-called transition time would be dealt with by a swathe of national measures. It's also important that Sweden gets assurances from a number of allies during the transition period.
But Turkey has made it clear it won't be supportive of the 2 Nordic nations joining NATO.
That's right. And remember that between the application and full membership, all 30 current members of NATO do have to approve this. And in that interim period, obviously, neither Finland nor Sweden would be covered by NATO's Article 5, which says an attack on one is an attack on all. So this, while they're hoping, while NATO Secretary General said that this would be a swift and smooth process, it may not be quite so smooth after all, with Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan accusing these countries of harbouring what he calls Kurdish terrorists. Let's hear what he had to say.
Scandinavian countries are guest houses for terrorist organisations. Members of the PKK and the DHKPC are hiding in Sweden and the Netherlands. They are even members of parliament in some countries. At this point, it is not possible for us to take a positive view.
Now, there have been reports in the press here that Russia was about to cut off gas supplies to Finland tomorrow. About 3/4 of Finland's gas comes from Russia. The Kremlin says this is just a hoax, but it has said that it has set a deadline of May the 20th for all Western consumers to pay for gas in rubles, or they could be cut off. What we have heard in the last couple of minutes is that apparently Russia says it will cut off its electricity supplies to Finland tomorrow. That accounts for about 10% of electricity. Too early yet to hear a reaction on that. We're also hearing that Finland's president, Sauli Niinistö, is planning to talk directly to Russia's President Vladimir Putin, although we don't have a date or timetable yet for that. Robin.
Michael Voss in Helsinki, thank you for that update.
Northern Ireland seems to be locked in a political stalemate after its election. The Democratic Unionist Party has blocked the election of a Speaker for the Assembly, demanding that post-Brexit trade arrangements are reformed. The dispute between the UK and the EU now means a shutdown of the newly elected Assembly is looking pretty likely. Our correspondent Andrew Wilson has been following the story. Andrew, so the Northern Ireland Assembly failing to elect a Speaker. Bring us up to date. What's going on?
Well, yeah, Jamie, it's being described as a destabilising vacuum, and that's pretty accurate, frankly. This was not unexpected. As soon as the Democratic Unionist Party, who have had the top spot since the 1998 signing of the Good Friday Agreement, the top spot in the Assembly, came in second in the elections this time round, giving Sinn Féin the top spot, people knew there would be trouble in terms of forming a power-sharing government. The DUP have blocked any discussions. They're not allowing anyone to elect a speaker, and if a speaker is not elected, then no first or deputy leader can be appointed, and no one can take their seats in the Parliament, so nothing happens. No governance, no decisions, no running of education, no running of the health system, all the rest of it. The DUP are saying unless Westminster renegotiates the Northern Ireland Protocol to their satisfaction, then they're going to hold this position and basically stall and put on ice all kind of political governance in Northern Ireland, which, as you'll see from my report now, is starting to go down badly with a lot of the public in Northern Ireland. Every Wednesday, Ellie Kirkpatrick steps through the so-called Peace Wall in Belfast to meet old friends. A cross-community group, as time goes by, of dwindling membership. They drink tea and they dance. Once they numbered about 30, but they've been going a while. They're all about life and community, an oasis of friendship surrounded by bitter political struggles. As a generation that's been through it all, they feel only irritation as Stormont still struggles to provide leadership and balance.
I really don't have any hopes. As far as I'm concerned, Stormont should be abolished long ago because they're all just play acting. I mean, there's no point in my starting on one politician. It applies to all of them. They're useless.
Doesn't matter whether you're black or white or what colour you are. It's who you are and how you live. You know, what's your attitude to life? No. So that's me.
This place is the talk of the whole world. It could only happen here. It's pathetic. It really is. No one wants us. You know what I mean? It's horrible. It's horrible for the people. And now the election's over, which was a great result, and there's still no government here.
Up the road at the Stormont Assembly, the parties are giving it another try. There's a new largest party, Sinn Féin, but the Democratic Unionist Party won't consent to forming government, not till Westminster resolves the protocol, and those are talks exclusively for London and Brussels. The Northern Ireland Protocol is a post-Brexit agreed condition, a new jungle of red tape for goods shipping from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. It's designed to keep the border to Ireland, an EU member, flowing freely. Although the DUP are pro-Brexit, they hate the protocol.
The protocol undermines the foundations of our political institutions. It has altered our constitutional status without our consent. It has created a border in the Irish Sea without our consent. It needs to be dealt with.
But that's not necessarily a majority view. With the nationalist demographic and moderate parties on the rise, some say that links with Ireland may outweigh the UK connection.
With the trajectory heading one way in terms of the potential, now very likely one would imagine, for a border poll into the future, the potential for increased calls for United Ireland, it bodes badly for the DUP that they would now even further alienate the nationalist electorate and moderate unionists who are beginning to wonder if this place could ever function in any kind of normal way with the current arrangements.
While the struggles continue in Stormont, the public patience is starting to wear thin at the lack of leadership. With pressing concerns such as healthcare and energy bearing down, the relevance of this century-old assembly is up for real debate. Now, these stalemates have happened in Northern Irish politics many times before, but we know it's serious this time because UK and EU negotiators are starting to make quite harsh comments in public about the stakes that both sides are holding at the moment. We know it's serious also because the White House is now dispatching American envoys to the cities involved, Belfast, London, Brussels, to see if they can't help iron out some of the problems in this situation. Nobody really wants the UK government to throw out the protocol. That's a nuclear option. We also know it's serious because Boris Johnson has now announced himself he will come to Northern Ireland on Monday and he wants to meet with the leaders of these different parties. Presumably he will ask them what will it take to be able to re-establish this protocol to both of your satisfactions. He is entering a minefield. Another side to this is the result of the election shows that the centre ground parties, particularly this party called the Alliance Party, did really well. They doubled their seats in Stormont this time round. They've now got 17 seats. That's about 20% of the members there. So they now, it's not clear, they have a larger say in the runnings of government, but it's not clear yet if they're pro-protocol or anti-protocol, pro-United Ireland or anti. It brings another voice to the game, which means that drives a wedge between the of nationalist and unionist. That could be a real change in Northern Irish politics.
Andrew, good to see you. Andrew Wilson, our correspondent.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, raise a glass to the vineyards of Nordic countries, growing grapes in the chilly north.
This is it. I'm just about to be shot.
Tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas.
So it's all begun now. Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated. Is the front line now after 9 days of fighting?
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from
within
the front
clear
line.
view of this front line position.
Have you ever wondered how much a human life is worth?
Have you ever looked up at the night sky and considered whether aliens are staring back? Or if it's even possible to measure intelligence?
If that sounds like you, it's time to join the Answers Project with me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge.
We've recruited the best brains in the world, award-winning astrophysicists, giants of medical science, and former presidential advisors to help us tackle humanity's biggest questions.
Find the answers wherever you get your podcasts.
This week on Razor, the battle to save Australia's little blue penguins. A strategy which shows that when you set out to save an iconic species, you also save their whole ecosystem.
We're in the middle of the largest little penguin colony in the world. And the only places that the population are doing well are places that there's some conservation plans in place.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. Climate experts are predicting that in 50 years' time, the weather in Scandinavia will be more like northern France. Wine production is already flourishing in Nordic countries due to rising temperatures and resilient grape varieties. And Nordic wine has been gaining popularity with wine lovers. Let's talk to Alicia Hansel, who's a wine expert and blogger. Alicia, welcome. I thought wine needed sunny southern climates. Why are Nordic wines such a big hit?
Well, absolutely. You're right there with kind of the sun. But as we know, in those Nordic countries, when it comes to summer, it might not be cool, but actually they have really long days. So it manages to kind of ripen those grapes with perhaps not so much heat. And if you look at kind of the EU's categorizing of countries and warmth, the Scandinavian Nordic countries in Zone A, which is about the same as Germany, apart from some areas, and Great Britain. And we know we're producing good wine here and in Germany, so it makes sense.
And is this about climate change, or is it also about the story of planting more suitable varieties of grapes that are better suited to colder northern countries?
A bit of both, really. So those colder northern countries, we've experimented with hybrids and crossings that are more resilient to the cold. And also it is the fact that people are looking for new areas of where to grow grapes because it's just getting too hot further south.
And for those of us who've never tasted Nordic wine, what does it taste like? Can you tell the difference?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the one thing that you can really taste when it's from a cool climate, essentially, is the acidity. So they're really zesty, really bright, and a little bit lighter because, you need that kind of warmth and the sunshine to get those big, bold, juicy flavours that we're, so used to. So it's not for, wines like that. They're delicate and light and just zesty. Really nice for summer, actually.
And if you're watching this and you own a vineyard in Italy, perhaps, or Spain, should you be pressing the panic button?
Not quite yet. Listen, we've all got a love affair with Italy and Spain still. So they've got a little more time left. But it's just really interesting. It's a new industry. Denmark, for instance, only were recognised as a wine-producing country in 2000. So they're very, very young still. A lot to learn, but it's exciting.
Just a quick thought about what's happening in the UK, because wind the clock back 30 years and mention British wine, people would fall around laughing. They're not laughing now. I mean, British sparkling wine in particular is being bought up by champagne growers, isn't it? I mean, it's an interesting developing story.
Absolutely. So one little thing I would like to clarify, British wine is actually wine made in Britain from grapes that are from anywhere. So it's English and Welsh wine that we refer it to. But yeah, absolutely. We've got Port Roger and Taittinger have actually, bought vineyards in the UK and are producing wine now. But yes, 30 years ago would have been laughed at, but we're winning awards, and we're winning awards against champagne houses. And that is to do with that kind of acidity coming through and just making it really elegant. And a bit like actually champagne was 30 years ago. Now the climate is a little bit warmer in Champagne. The champagnes are not tasting so champagne-like anymore.
Alicia Hansel, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you.
The President of the United Arab Emirates has died, aged 73. Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan came to power in 2004, but his role had been largely ceremonial since he suffered a stroke in 2014. He's expected to be succeeded by his half-brother. Israeli forces have charged at a crowd of Palestinian mourners carrying the coffin of the journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. Some mourners were arrested. A 51-year-old reporter was shot dead while working for the Al Jazeera news network. The channel says she was targeted during an Israeli raid in the occupied West Bank. An Israeli military report has conceded she may have been killed by an Israeli soldier. Hundreds of people have been told to leave their homes in the Australian state of Queensland after towns were hit by flash flooding. Flood warnings are in place for a number of rivers, with heavy rain forecast for some of the state's most populated regions. 13 people died in Queensland during heavy flooding in February. The DPRK has confirmed its first COVID-19 death. State media are reporting that 6 people died after suffering a fever, with one testing positive for Omicron. 187,000 people are said to be isolating and being treated for fever. DPRK leader Kim Jong-un has declared a state of emergency and ordered a lockdown.
Europe.cgtn.com has all of the week's top stories from China. Here's a quick take.
At a ceremony to mark 100 years of the Communist Youth League of China, the country's president Xi Jinping hailed the role of young people in the past and in China's future. Deep Blue Aerospace sent a rocket 1 kilometre into the sky before successfully returning it to its launch spot. China announced it will use its monetary and fiscal policy to promote job creation and mitigate the impact of the economy from the pandemic. A Chinese telescope has begun scanning the skies from Antarctica for Earth-like planets. In its first 5-year plan for the bioeconomy, China set out a strategy to create $3.28 trillion of value. A manned submarine capable of monitoring conditions on the seabed has returned to port.
All that and more at CGTN.com.
Now, here's something out of this world. It's a supermassive black hole at the centre of our own Milky Way galaxy.
A unique image of Sagittarius A star was unveiled by an international team of astronomers in the US Capitol, captured by the Event Horizon telescope. It's only the second ever direct image of a black hole.
The headlines again. Ukraine holds its first war crimes trial since the invasion, as a Russian soldier stands accused of shooting an unarmed civilian.
Our other headlines: G7 ministers meet in Germany. On their agenda, more aid for Ukraine and how to help with the export of Ukraine's grain harvest.
And tweeting down Twitter, Elon Musk says his takeover of the social media platform is on hold, sending shares plunging.
And that's just about it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
More on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Preview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. See you again on Monday, same time, same place. From all of the team here in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.